Hey there, it's Sandee Sgarlata. Get ready to dive deep into incredible stories of people who've taken life's challenges and turned them into a roadmap to happiness. On this show, we're not just talking about overcoming obstacles, we're uncovering the real, gritty secrets to living a life filled with peace, joy, and genuine happiness. This is Happiness Solved, so let's get started because happiness is a choice and the choice is yours. Kim Korven, so excited to be seeing you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is really wonderful.
Yes, I was just excited when you reached out to me to be on the show. Love this conversation. And it's so important. It's such an important conversation. So for the audience, Kim is a former divorce lawyer and divorce meditator. Meditation's probably good too, right?
I'm a meditator for a long time.
She's a divorce mediator who figured out how to divorce peacefully without her children suffering. And now she helps hundreds of women experience peace through the divorce process. So you're a divorce strategist and guide, and you help women who've wasted years in their marriage and have reached a breaking point, but are scared to expose their children to the trauma of traditional divorce. And I went through the same thing. I stayed in a marriage a lot longer than I knew I needed to be because I didn't want my son to suffer. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. And it all came about because that was me too. And that was the great irony. You know, I had clients, like one client, she and her husband, they needed to hire a mediator to help them divide household contents, including spices.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I never questioned it, until there's my marriage. And I'm like, well, I can't leave because that would harm my kids. So it's the great irony that I was terrified of that approach.
And yet you were divorced.
Exactly. That's the great irony.
So tell us the story. How did this, just walk us through the story of how you went from being a divorce lawyer to now a divorce strategist. I love that, divorce strategist, because I think that if couples could have a strategy in place, but that they're probably, sometimes they're not able to even go there.
Well, but I think part of it is they don't think that it's possible. We're so stuck in this paradigm of fighting. So what happened, right? Because that's what we all do. That's the divorce we all know. And it wasn't until, and I went for years going, should I stay? Should I go? Even thinking, gee, if he would just ride his bicycle into a semi one day, that would be the best. Now, you're laughing because you had a similar thought, right?
But of course, that's not what we want. You may think you want that, but at the end of the day, nobody wants that. No.
But we're also terrified of traditional divorce. And I should say, I laugh about it now. But I felt such shame and guilt about those thoughts. Like I told a really dear friend about a year before I actually asked my husband to leave. And her response was just, oh, and I'm like, is that bad? Like that's the path I was on. And she just nodded her head. So that was kind of the wake up call. Now, when I finally realized that my kids were being harmed by us staying together, that's when I really came face to face with, I cannot subject them to what I've seen other people's children experience or heard about.
Right.
Because I remember one client at the law firm, I didn't even work with this person, but every time the child was exchanged between the parents, the police had to be called, and I'd worked on a big file where dad had refused to pay support for his kids. And it ended up in a really ugly court battle where dad was going to go to jail. So it was like, I cannot do that to my kids. Now, what had happened in my legal career was I had worked in a really ugly child protection file where my client had a social worker helping her. And the social worker would always say, children love their parents no matter what. Doesn't matter what the parents do, kids will love their parents. That was my starting point. It was, how can I do this in a way where my kids will have the best relationship possible with their dad? Now, my husband didn't want to get divorced. I mean, his religion doesn't recognize divorce, okay? And he has a first cousin who's a priest. So all kinds of dynamics. And I think neither of us, our mental health we weren't in a good place mentally in the marriage. And, it's way lots of conflict. Now, so I basically dragged him along. And I did it from a perspective of what's best for the kids. And I didn't make him feel small. So he actually went along with it. And it wasn't this, let's rush to the lawyers at all. I'm just like, no, here are the issues. Here's what we can do. And he just kind of said, okay, Kim, can we get back together? Is there hope of getting back together? I didn't think there was, but I knew I had seen everything. So I'm like,
Right.
well, anything's possible here. And it was very unconventional. Like he would come and parent the kids here in the house, put them to bed at night, because this was the kids' safe place. So they were really front and center. And people who knew both of us used to say to me, Kim, how did you do it? And I was just, oh, anybody can do it. Because they knew he had anger issues and didn't believe in divorce. And I'm like, anybody can do it. But I ended up 6 or so years after I asked my husband to leave. I had a cousin who was going through a really ugly divorce battle, very traditionally, hardly saw his kids. And he walked off the face of the earth. And his body was found more than 3 months later. So he left 2 kids without a dad. That was when I realized I better figure out what I did so that result didn't happen to other families.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, it's I've seen nearly as much as you, obviously, because I'm not a divorce lawyer, but I've seen and I know of friends that had such horrific experiences and 6-7 year court battles that when they finally have everything's resolved, and they have, I don't know, let's just hypothetically, they've got $500,000 to split and every penny goes to the lawyers. And it's like, is it worth it? Was that really worth it?
Well,
And
I
your
know.
children are suicidal, like, right? Kids are suicidal. But, every penny that you have to your name goes to the lawyers. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. There's children only have one childhood.
I know. And like, I agree. And when I used to practice family law, I would say to my clients, look, do you want to pay me or do you want to have money for your kids?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a reason.
That's right. There's
I
a reason
never
you're not a
told you
divorce
this.
lawyer.
Right? Because it's like, what's good for the
Or the
family?
managing partner is going, Kim, you don't say that to your clients. We want the money, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, one of the managing partners, well, I mean, but the people who paid me, like I could collect what I billed on, right? Because I made sure it had value for people.
Yeah.
And I remember, so not surprisingly, prepared my own separation agreement. And I didn't mention custody in the agreement. Custody, it's old French word that's a property term, right? Who controls this type of property?
Right.
So when you think about kids, that's really, to me, it's really offensive. And plus, I had a child who had behavioral issues, who needed help. And I had a spouse who didn't always like to who wasn't always in a place where he could evaluate and make decisions for the good of our child. So I didn't believe in sole custody. I didn't think I should have have that label. But I knew if I put joint custody in the agreement, that perhaps our child would not get the assistance that was needed. Now, for my clients, a few of them, I had left custody out of the agreement, so I left it out. And it just said I was the primary caregiver. Well, the lawyer I took it to, she was actually a colleague of mine. She had a fit. Kim, how can you be doing this? You are leaving yourself so exposed when there are problems. The court won't be able to make a decision on it because, it's not here. It needs to be here. So I explained many times why it was worded the way it was, and she's still pushing, right? And finally, I said to her, look, can't you just prepare the letter that says, I'm signing this against your best professional advice and I can't sue you or the firm? Fine, Kim, right? And that letter didn't say if things went sideways. It said when things went sideways.
Really?
Right? Like she would not let me sign it unless the agreement was changed or I signed off. Right? It was about protecting her. And, I remember being so mad signing that. But I remember thinking, this is me who's part of the system. I understand the risks. And what my instincts were telling me when she was saying you needed it in, Kim, I'm like, we're going to end up fighting in court for 5 years. is what was
Yeah.
going through my head. If I put this in, it's going to be a deal breaker. And I thought, this is me who's part of the system, who understands the risks. This is how I'm being treated, basically like I'm 8 years old, maybe 10. And I thought for the average person going through divorce who's not part of the system, they're going to go, you feel like a failure.
Right.
It's like, well, I'm paying you. You're the expert. I guess I better do what you say, right? So that's how
Yeah.
the people spending all their money and fighting for 7 years.
Yeah.
But I had the background to be able to say that and to know it's possible. And so it's something I do with people now as part of the strategy piece, right? Like part of the discussion is, look, if you fight it out, this is what you're going to end up spending. This is
That's
how
right.
long you're going to be fighting. Like, what's most important to you? Traditional divorce isn't about people at the center. The law is at the center.
Mm,
There's no value there for humans. There's just heartache.
right.
Everybody loses. Yeah.
My goodness. Wow. All right. So I'm like, what's next? I'm now how many years out? Divorced? 15 years? I think I've been divorced for 15 years now. I'm remarried. When I finally reached the point where I was ready to divorce my ex-husband, he was kind of okay with it, and then he wasn't. Because again, like, I don't know why sometimes like people don't want to, when you have somebody come to you and say, yeah, I think it's time that we separate, divorce, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
even just break up. What I don't understand is why people, maybe you have some insight because you've dealt with clients in couples for so many years. Why is it that one person fights it? Like, if somebody came to me, because I'm remarried now, if my husband came to me and said, I'm sorry, I want a divorce. Well, I would want to have a conversation, but I'm not going to like fight him on it. Like, if you don't want to be with me, then I'm not, like, fine, let's go our separate ways. Because I don't want to be with somebody who doesn't want to be with me. So I just don't
Well,
understand.
I think there's a few possibilities that can happen. And one is how the human brain works. And what's familiar is viewed as safe, is how the brain interprets it, even if it's really, really like beyond the pale, that would make and I'm thinking even my thought process about, well, if he would just die, that I later found out every woman has those thoughts because it appears to be easier than divorce. Like, that's how twisted all of this is, right? That we think that's better than ending the marriage. It's just
Well, because it is.
bizarre.
It's like you feel like it's easier. That'd be the easy way
Yeah.
out, even though it's
And
not. Right.
and really, I think the other thing that has people resisting this is the structure of divorce and the fact that its home is in the civil court system where people are adversaries. So if you look at Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict, I found it really interesting, because there's 4 factors. I never remember all 4, but that will make a dispute go high conflict. And one is there's this community that says fight, fight, fight. Well,
Right.
and that's the dominant paradigm of divorce. A conflictpreneur, there's somebody close to you who's benefiting from stirring up this conflict. Well, that's the attorney who
Yeah.
has to be a zealous advocate for their client and protecting their client against worst possible legal outcomes. You're not a whole person. And the third one I always remember is one person feels humiliated. So if you don't know, like most people, when there's always one when there's friction in a relationship. And this is any kind of relationship. Like, I've seen this commercially as well. One of the parties knows this isn't working and I have to do something. The other party is, yeah, this isn't working, but it's what it is. It's going to keep going. It's where the brain is. And so if that person finds out it's not working by getting served with legal papers, and the legal paperwork, of course, is phrased in a way that's very negative and it's pointing fingers, you're to blame.
Yeah.
Like, that's the structure of civil pleadings. Pleadings are the court documents. Of course, you're going to feel humiliated. And it's way easy then to get to World War III. So really doing it well and in a way so everybody can be happy, it starts with how you tell the other person.
Right.
Okay. And I should say, like, I talked about how horrible it was and how he didn't want to get divorced. But when my former father-in-law passed away, I got invited to the funeral and I discovered he mentioned me in his obituary as the mother of his grandkids,
Good.
right?
As they should. Yeah.
right? But given the religious
Okay.
affiliation, I did not see that coming. But it just says how powerful it is to do this well, right? Like I really gave a lot of thought to how to end it. And I shared one of my best memories of our time together. So I didn't just turn this into cookie cutter, me against you and you're all bad. It was like, oh yeah. So I honored him in the telling and I made it about doing what was best for our kids. So
Love it. Yeah, and I think that you would hope that people would take that into consideration, and so often they don't, you know. So how do you work with women, right? Because you help you mentioned in your bio that you help women who's wasted years in their marriage, right? How do you walk them through that when they first come to you?
great question. There's a few different ways. Now, I have a divorce ritual that I sometimes use to help people process. It's sharing stories a lot, to validate their experience, to validate the love they still feel. It comes, so I mean, I still do some mediation. I do more one-on-one work. I have this really great community for women going through, to support women going through divorce that involves me facilitating peer support. So it's like a mastermind is part of it. And it's that not feeling alone. And I guess the other real critically important piece is I start with what's important to them always.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the strategy comes from there.
Okay. And it's going to look different for every single person, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that I do with everybody. Like the divorce ritual is really powerful because we have rituals for everything else, but not for divorce. So if you don't have that, how do you
So what is a
process?
divorce? What is it?
Well, you know how we have rituals for everything else? So I
Mhm.
created this little exercise with yarn that I share with people, and it's to honor the marriage, to honor the birth of the kids. And then there's end up cutting the knot you tied for this wedding. But it's just simple little things. And I think part of what happens working with me is for some reason, I don't put the law on a pedestal. Like all the law is the law is government's way of saying, okay, when people are in conflict or there's a potential of hurting somebody, here are the minimum standards for life stuff. And when people can remember, oh, yeah, like child support, really, that's about making sure my kids have a good life, which every parent wants. And if you phrase it that way, you can have a better conversation,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And it helps people connect with, oh, yeah, I'm actually the expert. And all of that helps with the healing. And, I worked with a couple recently and it was ugly, but they set a joint goal to have Christmas dinner with their adult kids. And it was beautiful. It was so much fun working with them because even the areas where there's usually a lot of friction and resistance, it was like, yeah, I'll pay spousal support. It makes sense here. When there had been so much hurt and trauma, and it was a situation with adult kids going, Mom, when are you going to leave? Like, come on, Mom, right? So it's wonderful. Like, it sounds magical and it's just to see it work, but it's that connecting to what's most important to you for your family. And that's the starting point, right? Much like mine with wanting my kids to have the best relationship possible with their dad.
Yeah,
And that's what's happened. So,
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, my ex-husband is a lawyer,
mhm.
litigator. Yeah, we were married for 21 years, and today we're like brother and sister. Now, it wasn't always like that. It was not always like that. However, I guess you could say, lucky for him that I'm a highly, highly, highly forgiving person, and so that's really how I've been able to manage to keep, you know, not let anything that happened prevent
Mhm.
me from having a relationship with him, And, our son will be 24 in a month. He's 23 now. He'll be 24. I was like looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, yeah, in 1 month from yesterday, he'll be 24. And he and his dad have a great relationship. His dad will call me and talk to me about women that he's dating or whatever. And, he comes over for holidays. We just went to, my sister-in-law was in town and he joined us for breakfast with my mom. And so he could see my sister-in-law. And, like, it's actually really, really incredible. And I'm sharing this, folks, with the audience just to share that it is possible. That I do know firsthand that it is possible to have a really great relationship with your ex.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and
Yeah.
it's a similar story with, and I call him my former spouse, not my ex. So,
Okay.
well, just it's got a kinder sound to it.
It does. Yeah, it totally does, for sure.
But we
No,
get
he's going to
together.
stay my ex. He's
Yeah,
going to stay my ex. He's my ex.
yeah.
I like what you said, but sorry, Mark.
Well,
You're my
I'm
ex.
sure he calls me his ex. Okay, I'm sure of that because I'm still, and it's funny. Like our son, same age as your son, he was big in band in school, and I remember before one concert, I'm running late, and my former spouse, he's on the parent committee, so he's there, handing out programs and stuff. So I send him a text and say, "Hey, save me a seat beside you because I'm running late." So I march in like right before the concert starts and the place is full. And I'm like, "Oh, where are we sitting?" And "You're not sitting by me. Stacy came and I asked her to save you a seat." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Right.
Thanks.
Well, but he took care of the issue
He
for
still
me.
took care of you. So that's important.
Right. And an earlier version of me could have been miffed about that.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. But it was just like, he got me a seat. This is great.
Yeah.
Well,
because in that moment, Kim, you had a choice as to how you were going to handle the situation. And many people would have been annoyed by that. And, it's a good thing that you didn't because,
Well, I guess that's
it
the
doesn't
other.
serve you,
No.
right?
Well,
It wouldn't have, yeah.
something else I say to my clients often is keep your eye on the prize. Like what's most important, and
That's
getting
right.
upset about that was not the prize, So it comes in all different perspectives. And I
Of
remember
course.
early on, like he left a lot of his stuff in the house. And I ended up going to get my master's. It was part of reclaiming me, and his stuff is still there. Well, he had this beer bottle collection. Every place he would go, he'd have a local craft beer and he'd bring the bottle home. I thought it was completely stupid. So before I packed up my house to rent my house out and move, I threw his beer bottle collection in the garbage, which I feel guilty about, right? I'm like, "Kim, that was so mean spirited." But yet here we are. We can still effectively co-parent, and he just did a road trip with our son. Our son lives on the West Coast now. So and the night before they left, we had a family dinner with my husband and my daughter, like our daughter. So it's a good blended bunch.
Yeah, it is possible. And another reason that I wanted to have this conversation with you today is to really emphasize that as parents, we have to take responsibility that everything that we do is going to affect our children in so many ways. It's going to affect them. And I'm going to reiterate it again. Children have one childhood. That's it. They only get one shot at being a kid. And as adults, we need to be the ones to be responsible to take care of our children because they are our future.
And yeah, they are. And I used to say, "Oh, there was no conflict in my house. There was just lots of tension." And then when I was researching to do a TEDx talk on the impact of conflict on children, I stumbled across this research paper where they had looked at all types of conflict, which includes the silent conflict, the tension, passive aggressive behavior, like pick me, that was us. And for kids of divorced parents, up to half of the behavioral and academic issues that are seen, they show up between 4 to 12 years before the parents stop living together.
Of course.
So when we think, so your comment about children just have one childhood, yeah. And we think we're doing them a favor by staying together, and that's harming them.
Yeah.
That's harming their childhood.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just think, what would the world be like if kids experience more peace in their families? Like, can you imagine?
Yeah. No, I can and I can't because,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, okay. So you have an amazing free gift to share with the audience. Do you want to tell everybody about it?
Sure. Well, a lot of the people who phone me and are interested in working with me, I hear, "Oh, I still love him. Like this is not about hating each other. So I created a quiz, Divorce with Love quiz.
Divorce with
Specifically, I did it just for this call. It was what the big let's do it, Kim, so that people can evaluate and ask themselves the questions, right? Like one of them I think is about, do you want to spend fortune on attorneys or would you rather take your kids on a cruise?
Yeah,
Because
that's
it's
great. That's
possible.
a great one.
Well, and it's those common sense ones to get people to think about because you're an example of it worked well, right? Like you knew kids have one childhood. I'm another example where it could have really gone either way, but for love of my kids. And I see it all the time in clients, and I think kids deserve more and their parents deserve more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. So that'll be in the show notes, everybody. Get that, download the quiz and take it. And you'll be able to see Kim's social media links in the show notes. So you can reach out to her on Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, peaceful divorces are possible. There's two of us right here.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
isn't it wonderful? We live in a society now where we can talk about this and
Yeah,
say, you don't have to do it this way.
that's right.
There's a healthy way to do it, a happy way.
There's totally a healthy and happy way to do it. Fighting over money is just plain stupid because it's just money's an energy. And you need to ask, and I just bring that up, Kim, because for so many people it is about money. And I know in my situation that I settled for a lot less. And my lawyer said to me after we had signed, because I ended up
Mm-hmm.
not using a lawyer. My lawyer said to me, I would never have advised you to sign this. And I go, I know. I said, but the money isn't worth it to me.
Well, and some
My needs will be met. It's
and
more important that my son is,
well, and there's a safety factor too. Like when we talk about narcissists,
yeah.
the worst is actually coercive control. I'm not going to say anything about it. That could be a whole other.
Whole other podcast, yeah.
But what happens when you divorce this way, like the way I help people with nobody feeling humiliated, those individuals who are very controlling, like sometimes, they just want to be loved too and treated with respect.
Yeah.
So they'll be fair up to a point if they're not humiliated. So yeah, it's walking away with less than you might otherwise get. And it works, right? It keeps women safe. And, it's counter the legal system, but
Yeah,
it keeps them safe and everybody much more likely to be happy.
for sure. Absolutely. Because I knew that. I knew that because I knew my ex-husband. I knew that if I made things difficult for him financially, that it was going to be a nasty divorce, and I didn't want that. So I was like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I'm good. I'm good. I don't, it's all good. And at the end of the day, while he still had his own trials and tribulations to go through with his father, today everybody's in a great place. And I'm very proud of my son and how he's handled things with his dad and his father. I absolutely love his father. That's never gone away. Yeah, but we're much better co-parents than we were as husband and wife.
Exactly, exactly. My kids have said to me, like, Mom, I don't know how Dad. Well, I remember my daughter saying to me once, I don't want to go to Dad's, Mom. Like, we always have macaroni and cheese on Tuesday nights, and we always have pizza on Fridays, and we eat at 5:30. And I'm like, look, with me, we could be eating anytime between 5 and 9, and it could be a bowl of cereal. So this is a really important life skill you're learning to be exposed to two very different ways of being.
That's
It's
right.
okay. It's good for you. You love him. You go and spend time with him, right? She was trying to get out of going to her dad's because it was boring. And I'm like, no way. But
Yeah,
yeah, very different people. And
always a
it's
different way to look at it. Oh my goodness. Well, Kim, thank you so much. Folks, check out her quiz and in the show notes. And thank you so much, Kim. This is such a great conversation. And I hope that there's some women out there that this will help at least have them feel better about maybe taking that leap if that's
mhm,
what they need to do.
exactly. And thank you for helping to spread the word because it is really important.
It is. It is. Your kids only have one childhood, but we only have one adulthood too. So, you matter just as much as your children do. Because if you're happier, they're going to be happier as well. So
Hmm.
all good. All right. Thanks, Kim. And thank you, everybody, for listening today. Take care, everyone.